In 1483, a 12-year-old boy woke up in the Tower of London and realized his chamber pot hadn't been emptied in 3 days. That detail, recorded by a servant who'd later flee in terror, tells you everything you need to know about what was coming. Because when the people responsible for removing your waste stop showing up, when the servants who've attended you since birth suddenly can't meet your eyes, when the very air in your golden prison starts to smell like fear and rot, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. This is the story of Edward V of England and his younger brother Richard the Princes in the Tower. And what I'm about to tell you will make you understand that sometimes the worst monsters in history aren't the ones wielding the blade. They're the ones who convince an entire kingdom to look away while children disappear. April 1483. King Edward IV dies suddenly, probably from pneumonia, possibly from eating himself to death. The man was notorious for his gluttony. His 12-year-old son, also named Edward, is now King of England. Except he's not really, is he? Because before young Edward can even be crowned, his uncle Richard, Duke of Gloucester, intercepts the boy's party on the road to London. Richard is all smiles, all reassurances. He's just protecting his nephew from dangerous advisors, he says. He's just ensuring a smooth transition of power. He's just doing his sacred duty as the boy's guardian. And young Edward, who's been raised to trust his family above all else, who's been taught that blood loyalty is the foundation of royal power, believes him. Why wouldn't he? This is his father's brother. This is family. Richard escorts his nephew to the Tower of London. And here's where most people get the story wrong. The Tower wasn't just a prison. It was a royal residence. Kings stayed there before their coronations. It was tradition. It was expected. It was normal. So when Edward is taken to luxurious apartments in the Tower, when he's given servants and fine food and entertainment, it all seems perfectly reasonable. Then Richard makes another move. He convinces the council that young Edward needs his brother with him. 9-year-old Richard, Duke of York, is brought to join his brother in the Tower. For companionship, the uncle says. So the king-to-be won't be lonely, he says. And the kingdom watches as 2 boys, one barely old enough to understand politics, and one still practically a baby, are locked away together in golden rooms with bars on the windows. Here's what makes this so psychologically devastating. Those boys knew something was wrong. They had to. Children aren't stupid. They read the room better than most adults. They would have noticed the servants getting quieter, the guards getting more numerous, the visits from nobles becoming less frequent. They would have felt the atmosphere shift from protective to predatory. But what could they do? Scream? To whom? Run? Where? They were children, trapped in a fortress, surrounded by men who took orders from their uncle. Their mother, Elizabeth Woodville, was in sanctuary at Westminster Abbey, powerless to reach them. Their maternal relatives were being arrested or executed on fabricated charges. Their father's loyal supporters were being systematically removed from power. The boys were completely isolated, completely dependent on the goodwill of a man who had every reason to want them dead. And Richard did want them dead, didn't he? Because in June 1483, Richard declared that his brother's marriage to the boy's mother had been invalid, that Edward IV had been secretly married to someone else first, which meant the boys were bastards, which meant they couldn't inherit the throne. It was a lie so transparent, so legally absurd, that most of Parliament couldn't even pretend to believe it. But it didn't matter. Richard had the armed men. Richard had the control. Richard had the boys. On July 6, 1483, Richard III was crowned King of England, and the 2 princes, no longer useful, no longer needed, no longer even acknowledged, disappeared from public view entirely. The last recorded sighting of them alive was in late summer 1483. Servants reported seeing them playing in the Tower gardens, though they appeared listless and afraid. Then the gardens were sealed off, and the servants were replaced. Then the boys were moved to inner chambers, away from windows where citizens might glimpse them. And then, nothing. Just silence. A silence that has lasted over 500 years. Now, here's where it gets truly horrifying. Because if Richard had simply had them murdered quickly, cleanly, in their sleep, that would be monstrous enough. But the evidence suggests something far worse. Suggests that those boys were left to waste away slowly, deliberately, in conditions designed to look like natural causes if anyone ever asked questions. The servant who fled and later testified described the boys in their final weeks as pale, thin, and perpetually terrified. He said they barely ate. He said they clung to each other constantly. He said the younger one cried every night for their mother. And then he said something that's haunted historians for centuries. He said the chamber pot, the one that hadn't been emptied, was eventually removed, not because someone finally cleaned it, but because there was no longer anyone alive to use it. In 1674, nearly 200 years after the princes vanished, workers renovating the Tower of London discovered something under a staircase. A wooden box containing 2 small skeletons, buried 10 feet deep. The bones were those of children, roughly the right ages, roughly the right time period. King Charles II, with characteristic Stuart sentimentality, had them placed in an urn in Westminster Abbey, declaring them the lost princes and giving them the royal burial they'd been denied. But modern forensic analysis tells a darker story. Because when those bones were examined in 1933, the scientists found something disturbing. The skeletons showed signs of prolonged malnutrition and stress. These children hadn't died suddenly. They'd died slowly, possibly over weeks or months. And here's the detail that should make your skin crawl. One skeleton's jaw showed evidence of extreme clenching, the kind that comes from constant, unrelenting terror. That child had spent their final days in such a state of fear that their body had literally begun to consume itself from the inside out. Think about what that means. Think about being 12 years old and watching your 9-year-old brother deteriorate beside you. Think about banging on doors that never open, screaming for help that never comes, begging guards who've been ordered not to respond. Think about the hope fading day by day as the food gets worse, the visits stop, and the reality becomes undeniable. Nobody is coming. Nobody cares. You were born a prince, and you will die alone in the dark, and the man responsible will sit on your throne and be called king. This is what absolute power looks like when it decides you're inconvenient. Not a dramatic execution, not a public spectacle, just quiet erasure. Just locked doors and thin soup and guards who've learned not to hear children crying. But the true horror of this story isn't what Richard did. It's what everyone else did, which was nothing. The kingdom knew. Of course they knew. Those boys didn't vanish into thin air. They didn't get spirited away by fairies or angels. They were murdered slowly and deliberately in the most famous fortress in England, and everyone just accepted it. Parliament accepted it. The church accepted it. The nobles accepted it. Because Richard had power, and power means you get to write the story. And the story Richard wrote was that those boys had never really mattered at all. He didn't even have to justify their disappearance. He just stopped mentioning them, and the kingdom followed his lead. That's the lesson here. That's what should terrify you. Not that one man was capable of this cruelty, but that an entire society was capable of enabling it through silence. The princes weren't Richard's only victims, of course. His reign lasted only 2 years before he was killed at Bosworth Field, supposedly screaming for a horse while his army abandoned him. His body was stripped naked, mutilated, and paraded through the streets before being dumped in an unmarked grave. When his skeleton was discovered under a parking lot in 2012, it showed evidence of scoliosis and battle trauma, including a blade wound to the skull that would have removed part of his brain. So there's some poetic justice there, I suppose. The man who slowly murdered children died violently and was forgotten in an unmarked hole in the ground. That doesn't undo the weeks or months they spent dying in the dark, doesn't erase the fear they felt, doesn't answer the questions they must have asked each other in whispers. Why is this happening? What did we do wrong? Is anyone going to save us? The answer, of course, was no. Nobody saved them because in the calculus of royal power, 2 children's lives weighed less than 1 man's ambition. Their sisters were eventually married off to shore up the Tudor dynasty that replaced Richard. And the kingdom moved on, because kingdoms always move on, because individual suffering disappears into the great grinding machinery of history. Those bones in Westminster Abbey might not even be the prince's. Modern DNA testing has been proposed and denied multiple times, probably because whoever they belong to, knowing the truth won't change anything, won't bring them back, won't punish their murderer, won't make the nobility of 1483 wake up and decide to care about 2 frightened children locked in a tower. We tell ourselves we've evolved past this kind of horror. We tell ourselves that in our enlightened age, children can't just disappear into the machinery of power while everyone looks away. But that's a lie we tell to sleep better at night. Because right now, somewhere in the world, a child is learning that their royal blood means nothing that their title means. Nothing that all the wealth and privilege and sacred birthright in the world can't protect them from an adult who's decided they're in the way. The methods change, the technology changes, but the fundamental truth remains. Power protects itself, and anyone who threatens that power, even accidentally, even by simply existing, becomes disposable. The princes in the tower aren't ancient history. They're a warning we keep ignoring. Their bones rest in Westminster Abbey, beneath an inscription that calls them murdered innocents. But the real inscription should read something different. It should read, "Here lie 2 children nobody saved, in a world that chose not to see." Because that's the truth. That's the story those bones tell. Not about one monster named Richard, but about a whole kingdom of people who heard children crying and decided it was easier not to listen.